What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So it seems like every single year we talk about what's next for Nintendo on the hardware front, and now we see investors asking about that same thing. Nintendo gave some interesting responses when it comes to going from one generation to the next, and we're going to go over that one here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a new patent that was spotted online from Microsoft and the Xbox that might let you use physical media on your Xbox Series S, and we're also going to be going over Sony's own responses to investor questions, specifically around the idea of some of their big first-party titles heading to a subscription service day one. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with Ubisoft and some of their upcoming titles that they expect to have out in the next 12 months. We can see this posted up by Eurogamer, saying Ubisoft confirms Avatar, Mario Rabbids, and Skull and Bones will launch this financial year. So sometime between right now and next April, that being in 2023, these different titles will release. It could be any time though. So like, I'm looking at Avatar and Mario Rabbids. Those seem like good titles to have out this holiday, and then maybe they just kind of push Skull and Bones out the door like first 3 months of next year. There was some gameplay that showed up online that leaked out for Skull and Bones. The game just does not look interesting at all. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that game when it releases. But Avatar, obviously there's a lot of hype right now with movies and all of this stuff. I just never got into Avatar, but clearly there's a lot of interest around that game. And then Mario and Rabbids, I am very excited for that one. I liked Kingdom Battle, so Sparks of Hope looks really good as well. We'll just have to keep an eye out for any unannounced titles, which they did mention are going to be revealed at some point. It's going to be very sporadic over the summer. There's no E3 to kind of just point at and say, okay, most likely that's where we'll see these different games revealed. So we'll just keep an eye out for anything Ubisoft has to announce, but at least we have an idea that these 3 titles will fit in to the next 12 months. Also, while we are going to be talking about Nintendo's comments around next generation for their hardware, they did answer some questions around Nintendo Switch Online that got speculation running wild online. We can see this posted up. This by VGC, who did the translations there. The total subscribers of Nintendo Switch Online has not been updated from the 32 million subscribers we disclosed last September, but is gradually increasing as the sales of Nintendo Switch increases. Of course, there are customers who allow their subscribership to expire and then they don't renew. So we believe it is important to continue releasing software that allows players to continue enjoying not only online play, but also enhances their overall experience. We will continue to expand our services and create new content for our customers throughout this year. And technically, they could just release another Nintendo 64 game, and this statement would be true. I saw a lot of people go, well, Game Boy's coming. And I do think that we could see that happen. If there's a new system that's going to be introduced this year, say around September, when a lot of people's subscriptions would end up expiring and then you decide if you want to renew, that's a good spot to drop Game Boy, a Pokemon game, maybe transfer pack compatibility with a Pokemon Stadium dropped into the N64 expansion pack. A lot of possibilities there that, of course, would keep people engaged, or they can just do game trials and then more 64 games and maybe some Genesis stuff mixed in there. But yeah, they're probably going to add more stuff to their Switch Online. It's not too shocking to hear that. Oh, and we just talked about the Duke Nukem Forever 2001 build and how it looked like it was setting up to be completely leaked online, where people can just download it and see what exactly was being worked on back then. And it looks like it has officially leaked out. There is an entire link you can check out in the sources for archive.org. And see exactly what we had here. I mean, to be honest, it's not like it's a game you're downloading and just playing. There's a lot of development builds, files, all this stuff, maps that are completely unfinished. You can play some parts of it, and really, you can just get a look at the concepts that they were at least going to attempt to do here with this Duke Nukem Forever game. But they scrapped, rebooted. Eventually, we got in 2011. I'm curious if anyone really does anything with the source code or anything like that and eventually releases a product or just some kind of game that you can just click and play and they try to finish some of it. I don't know. It's just cool to see. So check out the link down below in the sources if you're curious. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their next generation device. It's going to happen eventually, and no one's shocked to hear that there's probably a Switch 2 or whatever Nintendo decides to come up with in their Willy Wonka R&D department. But there was a question asked to President Furukawa around what their plans are in the coming years and how they would even do a smooth transition and all this. And we can see this posted up. This was translated over by VGC. There is something I will point out while we're going through this when it comes to some of the wording and the nuances here, as some did look into the translations a bit more. Again, we will get like full English translations from Nintendo in several days or so, but for now, this is what we have to go over. They say, we have already announced a portion of our software roadmap releasing up to next spring. Unlike the past, we continue to have a large variety of games scheduled to be released, even beyond 5 years of release. This is because the Nintendo Switch has had such a smooth launch, allowing us to focus all of our development resources on a single platform. However, the question of whether we will be able to just as smoothly transition from the Nintendo Switch to the next generation of hardware is a major concern for us. That's the part that I want to point out, because Tom James over on Twitter did mention that they looked through it as well and pointed out it was more or less them saying it's a big priority on their minds, not like a negative idea of, oh, we're concerned about it necessarily. So keep that in mind. Basically, it's a big focus and they're taking it very seriously, which, yeah, they're going to attempt to go from a very successful platform to basically an unknown, right? Whenever you launch a new generation, you're not necessarily sure how it's going to turn out right away. Anyway, they go on to say, based on our experiences with the Wii, Nintendo DS, and other hardware, it is very clear that one of the major obstacles is how to easily transition from one hardware to the next. To help alleviate this risk, we're focusing on building long-term relationships with our customers. While we will continue to launch new software on the Nintendo Switch, we also provide services that also use Nintendo accounts and other IP outside of gaming software. We intend for this to help build a lasting impact with our customers. Now, something that a lot of people seem to take away from this is Nintendo kind of hinting towards the idea of backwards compatibility, but I'm really looking at that Nintendo account system that they have set up currently, one that would allow your purchases to go from one generation to the next. I think that's the biggest thing they're focusing on, because that Nintendo account would also go outside of the current Switch, right? Like for mobile devices and all these different things that they themselves are saying we're focusing on as well outside of just our gaming platform. Now, they are doing stuff with the Mario movie, right? They have an entire theme park currently. They're building more of them. So a lot of stuff is going into this, but backwards compatibility for the next system, I think, is paramount for the Switch. I do believe it would make that transition way easier, just in general. And that's something else they mention here. Look, the Wii and the DS, very successful systems, right? The Wii, over 100 million sold. The DS, over 150 million sold. But when they went from the Wii to the Wii U, massive drop off, like 80%, right? The Wii U sold like 13.5 million. Even the DS to the 3DS, 50% drop off. Like 75 million down to the 3DS. 3DS, good system. It just didn't really catch on like the DS. So it appears that that is something in the back of their mind when going from a very successful system like the Switch and whatever's next. Which does make me wonder if Nintendo is really interested in the idea of a massive clean break from this current generation, or do those like iterative updates for like 10 or 15 years or something there. I mean, the Switch itself is a very powerful brand, and I don't think it's a good idea to do something like they did with the Wii U, where they put another letter on the side, like Switch U or Switch S or something like that. Keep the Switch branding overall, and just continue to introduce more and more devices underneath of it. If it's backwards compatible, it's just like, all right, you won't be able to play these newer games on your 10-year-old Switch. I think a lot of people will come to terms with that eventually. But something that'll be a lot harder to explain is why there'll be no backwards compatibility. So I hope that is something that Nintendo is planning around right now, especially if they want this Nintendo account system to be taken seriously. The fact that the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, all that stuff is tied to a subscription service tells me that will just move over smoothly to the new device, and they continue just introducing more and more of these as they go along. And then who knows, maybe the Switch ends up being this 200 some odd million seller because they never move on to the brand and they treat it like the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color all under one kind of family of devices. But let me know what you think about what they've said here with their generation to generation, the transition, and is backwards compatibility one of the most important parts around that move? Next up, let's talk about a new patent that was spotted online for Microsoft and the Xbox. This isn't necessarily a new idea, but the patent, well, it was filed in 2020, November actually. It just went public very, very recently. We can see this posted up. By Game Rant, who spotted it online, Microsoft patent could verify physical games for Xbox Digital Library. Here's a nice little diagram here, and yeah, it does indeed show the Xbox One, and then what I think is the Xbox One S all digital, if I'm not mistaken there. The idea being, you have your local network environment, so you put the game into your user device that, again, looks like an Xbox One. It will then verify that you own the game. It appears to send it to your phone, to your computer, and then to your other device, that being your Xbox One S all digital, showing that, yes, the game is verified in your Xbox One, so you can then use it there. Maybe you have that One S all digital in another room. In that case, you'd be able to play off of the disc that's in your Xbox One. Now, around the time the Xbox One S all digital was being rumored and eventually it came out, there was this program that was getting thrown around in the rumor speculation. I think maybe Microsoft even talked about it at one point with retailers, and that was the idea of like the disc to digital, where you would take your games to a Microsoft store, for example. When there's a retailer that's participating in this program, you would hand them your disc and then they would hand you a code or a voucher. It's very possible this is something that would have also been kind of designed for these different stores, where they would take the game, pop it into an Xbox or something, call to a server, and then get back a code. I do like the idea, though, of you maybe buying an Xbox Series S for another room in your house, and as long as you have a device like your Xbox One X or your Xbox Series X or anything, you can put the game in there and it will verify it for use on other devices in your house. It's a patent right now, but at least gives us an idea as to maybe a way that Microsoft is looking into this. Maybe they come up with an external drive. The HD DVD could live on in like 2023 or something. Next up, let's talk about that Indie World showcase that took place yesterday. It was about 20 minutes long, and there were actually quite a few games in there. They had, I think, like 20 titles that they showed off, and the only thing here is there wasn't a massive standout game. There's still some pretty cool ones and certainly some very creative games, but let's start going through it here. I have a nice little list of them, starting with Ooblets, that's coming out summer 2022. Batora Lost Haven, autumn 2022. Elekhead, that's summer 2022. Soundfall, that is out now. That one's kind of interesting. It's like this dungeon crawler rhythm style game. Again, there were a few games in here that caught my attention, but nothing that like exploded off the screen to me. Wild Frost, winter 2022. Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, that's summer 2022. Gunbrella, this game looks really cool. I like the 2D aesthetic, the art style and all this, but it looks like it controls really smoothly. So that's one I'm keeping an eye on, but that's not coming out till next year, so we'll see. We Are OFK, that's summer 2022. Silt, that's June 2022. That looked like a very atmospheric kind of game where you're diving underwater and all this, and it looks like a game that you could kind of just sit back and play in the middle of the night and get lost in it. Mini Motorways, that's out now. Wayward Strand, that's July 21st, 2022. Cult of the Lamb, 2022. Another Crab's Treasure. This game looked cool too. It's like a roguelike crab game where you're changing your shell out with like trash and stuff. It looked kind of fun. That's 2023. One Shot World Machine Edition, summer 2022. Gibbon Beyond the Trees, that's out now. Idle Manager, August 25th, 2022. Card Shark, June 2nd. We have Cursed to Golf, summer 2022. A Guidebook of Babel, autumn 2022. And then Opus, Echo of Star Song. That's out now. So while there was certainly a lot of variety here, I'm sure many people can point to at least one game that was in there that were like, oh, it was kind of cool. Like I said, nothing that was like massive, like, whoa, this was a crazy Indie World showcase because of that one closeout game. In fact, I think the closeout was a sizzle reel, which was sort of strange, but again, it was an Indie World showcase. You look towards that for creativity and new ideas, and there were certainly quite a few of those here. Coming out of this, though, Gunbrella, for me, is probably the highlight of the show. Not coming till next year, but I'll certainly be keeping an eye on it. In our last bit of news, let's talk about Sony and some of their comments around the idea of their first-party games, the big AAA PlayStation Studios games, going into a subscription service, similar to how Microsoft does with their Game Pass titles. This was asked by investors, and we can see this posted up. This was transcribed over on PlayStationLifestyle.net. It's from the Sony CFO, Hiroki Totoki. They say, I will refrain from making comments on the competitor strategy. So there you go. Our current thinking is to have development costs appropriate R&D investment for quality products, and that will improve the business in the long run, which, by the way, it was also announced that Sony is investing $300 million into first-party games, and they're aiming for multiple platforms. So I guess look towards like PC and stuff for that. They also say AAA type titles on PS5. If we distribute that on the subscription service, we may need to shrink the investment needed for that, and that will deteriorate the first-party title quality. So we want to make sure we spend the appropriate development costs to have solid products and titles to be introduced in the right manner. This obviously kicked off the whole argument of, is Game Pass viable for any other company other than Microsoft? And we're not really sure yet. There's a lot of people who say the Game Pass formula, it's tried and true. Obviously it works. I mean, we don't know that yet. It's still kind of an experiment that Microsoft is running now. And I say that because no one else is doing it. Like Nintendo and Sony are basically sticking with what's worked. You produce a game and you sell it, and then you move on to the next game. Well, Sony's gonna be doing a lot of live service stuff, but still, with their PlayStation studios, they wanna create something like God of War Ragnarok with $100-some-odd million worth of a budget, and then sell it at $70 a piece, and attempt to sell 15 or 20 million of them over the life. And remember, Sony moved the price from 60 to 70 for their games. I don't necessarily think, in their mind, they're gonna now backtrack and just start dropping these games into PlayStation Plus Premium day one. And don't even get me started with Nintendo. They do something like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe that probably didn't cost them much, but nowhere near as much as something like Horizon or a Starfield or a God of War or Gran Turismo or anything like that. They move it over to the Switch, sells 45 million copies. No one's looking at Nintendo to do anything like this. I mean, would you blame them at this point? But Sony still not 100% sold on the idea of Game Pass, and it's still up to Microsoft to prove that it is a viable strategy, like I said, outside of the deep pockets of Microsoft now. But hey, if it continues to grow and they have a massive subscriber base, then they're just talking about all of this revenue and profit that they're making, you might see Sony start to move in that direction. But for now, they're going to still play around with their PlayStation Plus tiers. Who knows, maybe Sony can build up their own subscription service and have, 20, 30, 40, 50 million people subscribe to it without those day one releases. Well, we're going to see going forward if this subscription future really is viable for any of these other companies, especially with the way these budgets are ballooning. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, when do you think Nintendo announces their next generation system? 20% said 2023, 45% said 2024, 19% said 2025, and then 15% are saying we're basically going 10 years with this current Switch generation. I said announce specifically because they can announce the brand new system, say in 2023, but then not come out till 2024. However, I am also looking towards 2024 as an announcement and then eventual release. Who knows? Maybe they announce it in 2024. It doesn't come out till the following year. That'd be a pretty impressive run for the current Switch now, but we'll see. One thing's for sure though, next year, we'll get into 2023, we're certainly going to start having a lot more conversations, I'm sure, about what's next for Nintendo in this Switch system. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Nacer saying, although I don't find it likely, I'd love to see another take by Sony at a handheld gaming console. I believe Sony would also benefit from this a lot. I think that even a system with a physical design that just looks like a modernized PS Vita instead of something like the Steam Deck and Nintendo Switch would do well on the market. I would love to see Sony take another shot because the Vita still looks current to this day. If you get one, you hold it up, you're like, wow, this looks like it came out like in the last year or so. So yeah, I would love to see what they could do with technology now with a PlayStation Vita handheld. The problem is, it's pretty clear Sony had a hard time developing for both systems, like with a steady flow of content and output. And with the way that their studios are going now, where they have these massive budgets for titles and the focus that Sony has, which are these games that are super high quality and they're worth the $70, I don't know if there's a place for the Vita for them currently. I mean, even Nintendo has moved to a one system setup, where before they had their Wii U and their 3DS, now consolidating themselves down to releasing for one console. So unfortunately, I'm not counting on it, but it's a future I'd love to see. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was Nintendo and next generation. When do you think they start talking about what's after the Switch? And then also, what about this Xbox disc to digital patent, this system or program they come up with? Would you buy an external drive for your Xbox Series S if it means you could use those physical games? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.